I think I'm going to kick off. And so first of all, welcome all to what is the 11th fortnightly Transition Buxton mini seminar. It will last 1 hour in total. We will have two 10-minute presentations and then a 40-minute chat. We will be recording this. My colleague will be pressing that button. In fact, he's already done it. So if for any reason you don't want your face or voice to be seen or heard, then you can mute yourself and switch off your camera. But otherwise, we're all in this together, we will keep you all on mute. You will be universally muted apart from the speaker and me while the presentations are going on, and then you have the power to unmute yourself when you want to speak up. And when we're at questions and answers, I just ask you to put your hand up so that I can say whose turn it is and manage the questions so we're not all talking at once. But we mute you during the presentations to get rid of all the background noise. So we have two well-informed speakers this evening, in fact 3, because Tina's replicated herself or delegated to a buddy. Tina Heathcote and Andy Parker are from Buxton Town Team. And we need that muting done, Jane.
Well, I'll do. I was going to wait for you to stop speaking because you will be muted as well.
Oh, right. Okay, I'll stop for a sec while you do that.
Now, unmute. You can unmute yourself, right? Mute all.
Yeah.
We're muted.
Right. Unmute yourself.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you. It's just that background noise was starting to be problematic. So for, I think it's about 4 years, the town team have been working away at travel planning for Buxton, and have actually reached a point where we are at national best practice, creating a sustainable travel plan for the whole town. And it's quite exciting. They've been working with local authorities and transport providers and so on. And it's at quite an important threshold, I believe, which Tina will talk to us about. But she's also going to talk to us specifically about some new walking and cycling routes that they want us to help them, use so that they become used and become normalized. I think that's what she's going to talk to us about. And then after Tina, we're going to hear from Roland, who is from our equivalent group in Hayfield, but his professional background is in transport planning. And his particular specialist topic is about shared ownership transport, car clubs, bike clubs, that sort of thing. I believe that is the main topic of what he's going to talk to us about. And then we'll put that all together and have a good old chinwag. So I'm going to shut up and hand over to Tina, who can unmute herself and chat away. And I will give you an 8 minutes warning when you've got 2 minutes left, Tina.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Jean. Thanks for the 8-minute warning. That's brilliant. And hello to everybody. Can you see the screen okay and the presentation? Can you nod if you can see the screen? Thank you, Jean. got it. Brilliant. Okay. So thank you very much for inviting the town team to talk to Transition Buxton. It's a total delight to be here, and I think we know so many people. It's brilliant. Thank you. So a sustainable travel plan for Buxton. I thought it might be useful to go back to the beginning and tell you how it all started. So the first thing was that we had a conference in 2015 entitled 2020 Vision for Buxton. People came along and gave their thoughts and views on how Buxton would look in 2020. I have to tell you that not one single person said that there was going to be a pandemic. However, we have one. So one of the things that came out of that conference was the fact that Buxton was and will grow very fast. There's lots and lots happening. And we could see that there was a real need for an access, parking, traffic and transport group. And we set one up. And Jean, helpfully, showed us some pictures. So here we are. This picture shows 200 people in 177 cars in downtown Seattle. We couldn't get them of Buxton, but you get the idea. So this is 200 people in 177 cars. This is 200 people without cars in downtown Seattle. This is 200 people on a train, obviously prior to COVID. This is 200 people on bikes. And just to remind you about the amount of space that people take up on bikes as opposed to in cars, this is 200 people in 177 cars. Having realized that the town was going to need to look at the way that it moves around and gets people to and from work and school and so on, we decided to have another conference and really investigate Buxton and how to keep it on the move. We had a very good conference, and several of you, I think, may well have been there. We had a very good conference. We had a lot of speakers. Nobody was allowed to speak for more than 5 minutes. And we had people from local users, all sorts of people, taxi drivers, accessibility groups, lorry drivers, but we also had people from a national perspective as well. And that included Sustrans, Ecom, the chap who was influential in the Poynton safe roundabout scheme. If you recall, there used to be traffic lights and they made shared space, and it's worked very well. The last speaker was Daniel Godfrey. He's principal transport planner at Ecom. Daniel left us with this task. Well, loads and loads of things to do, actually, but we were really quite enchanted by the bottom left bit, which says, how does participation help to get the best option? And that's when we realized that we needed to get lots and lots of people together to talk about and determine how we should all develop sustainable travel in Buxton, for Buxton. So we met with a whole crowd of people, Derbyshire County Council, High Peak Borough Council, university, and lots of other organisations, including voluntary organisations in town. We formed a steering group to develop the travel plan. Our main focus has always been and will always be sustainability, which is an interesting word, but I think we all know what it means. So why were we doing all this? Well, our primary objectives were and still are in actual fact to reduce congestion, improve parking and traffic systems, have more people walking and cycling, an enhanced visitor economy, better air quality. Sorry about that, I just clicked the wrong thing. Better air quality. I think recently Jean Todd sent me a link to say that Fairfield Road had been voted 6th worst in the East Midlands for air quality. That spurred us on again. And obviously another objective is improved health and well-being and a more attractive place for us all to be. We did a lot of data collection with the authorities and the university, all sorts of surveys, which were organised by other people, but we had access to them, including employee travel surveys, school travel surveys, and we used a whole load of data that was available to us. Much more locally, we talked to residents and we did a resident survey. We also did a rail user survey with the Friends of Buxton Station. We did a visitor survey and in fact a small business survey as well. And all of them were on paper and online. The resident survey, which some of you I do hope completed, gave us a tremendous amount of information. We encouraged people to complete the survey. We had a competition and a prize draw with some really good prizes, including things like electric bikes and so on. The one thing that we did, which we were actually very strongly advised not to do, and we knew that we shouldn't, but we gave people the chance to come up with their thoughts and ideas. So it wasn't just a tick box exercise. And actually we had, well, getting on for 1,000 responses, which is pretty good in a town the size of Buxton. And I think we only had about 2 or 3 returns that were not really useful to us. Most people took it very seriously and gave us some very, very helpful, useful feedback, and were able to share their views. There's been lots to do, and so far we've had some media coverage and quite a lot of awareness raising in different formats. We've distributed and collected flyers and posters and surveys and all sorts. We had a Come and Try Travel Day on April the 28th on the marketplace a couple of years ago. And that was probably one of the coldest days in Buxton in April that there'd ever been. Conversely, we also launched the Friends of the Peak District Boundary Walk. And that was in June a couple of years ago. And that was on the hottest day ever in Buxton, I think. We've also done some traffic counting, a lot of traffic counting. You may have seen us over time sitting on picnic chairs on street corners, looking a bit odd, but seriously, observing and counting traffic. We've also...
2 minutes, Tina.
So thank you. We've also done a lot of data inputting of surveys, and we've had lots of meetings. There's lots more to do. The next job is to launch the Safer Walk and Ride Network, which is about sharing place, space and ideas, and it's just one facet of what we're doing. This map here shows you, well, it's actually, this is the inside of a flyer that we've drafted, and gives you an idea of where the 5 main routes that we're launching will be from to. They all start at the pump room. They take people out to Water Swallows, to Fairfield, to Harper Hill and to Burbage, and they take them off the main routes, and we've linked the business parks and schools quite well, so people can move around very safely, we hope. I should say that this Big Buxton experiment is to actually test the routes. We know that a lot of the surfaces are not suitable for walking. This is a draft of the poster too. I'm going to hand over to Andy now because he's going to take over the next bit. Andy, just tell me when to click.
I think I'm here now.
Okay.
I think I've got 30 seconds, have I?
Yeah, sorry about that.
All the work we've done is really of a local basis, although we have been involved with the Derbyshire County Council. But back in March 2020, which is a date that everyone will remember, of course, the Department of Transport brought out this report, Decarbonising Transport. And they, if you can advance the slide, please, Tina. They brought out 6 basic recommendations from this whole 60-odd page report. And what we'd like to do is just very briefly, Tina, look at some of the things that we think might have a local impact, because if this is national government, the funding we're talking about is just out in a totally different league from anything we can get from Derbyshire County Council, and certainly anything we can get from voluntary organisations. So we'd just like to show you 1 or 2 things that might be interesting. There were 6 areas of recommendation. This first one about accelerating modal shift to public and active transport. There are 2 at the bottom, one of which is not displaying very well, I'm sorry. Encouraging cycling and walking for short journeys, and explore how best to support the behavioural change required. So if that's coming from national government, then we can get on board with that one. Decarbonising, we thought right from the beginning, you only have to look out through your window to see how many during the course of a day, how many delivery vehicles come past, delivering to the same houses, different companies, different vehicles. There's no way on a local level you can tell Amazon not to do that. but the government might have a better chance, and they are looking at last mile deliveries and in a sustainable way. And finally, again, an acknowledgement that these solutions are not going to come from national government, they're going to come from local organisations. So organisations like the Town Team and Transition Buxton should have support in doing what we think is appropriate at a local level. Thank you.
So this is not entirely the end of what we're doing. It is just the beginning of keeping Buxton on the move. Thank you very much for your time. It's that's been, you know, a lightning flash through what has been a lot of work by many people. You've got Andy and I here this evening, but there are probably, I would think, at least 50 people who are actively engaged and involved in what we're achieving or trying to achieve, and many, many more people who are offering support and all sorts of help in all sorts of ways. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tina. We'll get to questions after Roland. I've already got several questions to ask you, but I'll save them up. So I'd like to move swiftly on to Roland, if you're there. I'm not sure which of your screens on here is the right one, and ask you to share your slides. Here they come. Excellent.
Okay, does that look okay?
Yeah, that looks fine to me. And like Tina, I'll give you a 2-minute warning when you've done 8 minutes.
Yeah.
If you want it.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, that's
all
useful.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for having me. It's very nice to speak with you all on this subject and share what we've done in Hayfield and what we're currently trying to do. Hayfield Sustainable Transport is part of Sustainable Hayfield, and we're a community benefit society. We're looking at filling gaps in transport provision, gaps which are currently filled by people using private cars. We want to develop sustainable services to fill those gaps instead. And we're looking at how users can take control and responsibility for doing this. And I'll explain why that's a useful thing to do. Let's just move on. Okay, so the problem is that there's too many cars, and one of the effects of that is that they undermine other services. If people are spending money on their cars, they're not spending, if they're using their cars, they're not using the other services. If the other services aren't being used, they become financially unviable and are withdrawn. Something like 20% of households don't have access to a car, so when these services are withdrawn, they have no access to the transport that they need. Owning a car creates a financial disincentive to use anything else. Most of the car's cost, just over half, are fixed. You pay them whether you use the car or not. So if you use an alternative and keep your car as a privately used vehicle, you end up paying twice. So that's an important difficulty, and we're looking at how we can shift from privately used vehicles to shared vehicles that can be used on a pay-as-you-go basis. Size of the problem, there's a significant problem. There's 36 million cars in the UK. Average, don't know, it depends on the car, around £3,000 a year. That's over £100 billion per year. And they provide 80% of transport. So it's a very important area to include in the solution. It may be seen as the problem, but it's also where the solution lies. Because as the name of Transition Buxton suggests, it's the transition from where we are to where we're going. And you have to deal with where we are at the moment, and that place is with 80% of transport being provided by private car. So we ought to provide alternatives. You can't use the alternative unless it's provided. And if people are using, making 80% of their journeys by private car, then if you provide an alternative and they carry on using their car, then that alternative won't be viable. So do you provide both at once? Let's assume as a country everybody provides the cars, and we provide let's assume it's a similar cost, £100 billion of sustainable alternatives. How long can, as a country, we provide both together, costing now 200 billion a year? How long can you provide both whilst that transition takes place? And remember, the car user who's filling those gaps with their car, they can't use the alternative, sustainable alternative, unless it is provided. Okay. So there's financial. The other problem of providing alternatives is that there's financial risks associated with buying a new service. If you provide a new service and you don't have enough users, the revenue from use doesn't cover the costs. And currently, transport providers have that risk. The risk of a new service, it's not viable. They are the ones who have to cover the costs, along with governments who provide some subsidy for services like that. And yet, government and transport providers don't know who's going where and when. So it's very difficult for them to manage the risks associated with a new service. Knowing who's going where and when is absolutely fundamental to providing a new service. So the risks, managing the risks. Many markets have mechanisms for managing risks, but in transport, they are taken by the providers, who are very badly positioned to take those risks. They don't know who's going where and when. Users, on the other hand, do know where and when they're going. And so do organisations that are responsible for the activities that make journeys necessary. Employers, hospitals, ticketed events. Those people aren't making these journeys for the sake of it. There are reasons, and those reasons, those organisations that are responsible for activities that make transport necessary, often have overview data and communication links, which could be used to manage the risks associated with the new service. But providers don't have that overview data and communication links. And if they did, what would they do with it? They would say, we'll put the new service on, everybody still uses their cars, there's no transition, there's no mechanism for transition. So it's difficult for people to sell their cars. So we've tried putting on commuter services between Hayfield and the nearest train station. Currently, lots of people, over 100 people, make that journey by car, costing a huge amount to them. So we try putting on a commuter shuttle, a train station shuttle. But they carry on using their, because it's difficult for them to sell their car and make that transition, because they have other uses for that car. Unless we can fill all the gaps that they fill with the car, they're not going to make that transition. Unless they can leave the car at home for somebody else to use and use it on a go basis. And that breaks the trap that they're in, where they may as well use the car if they've bought it, because otherwise they're paying twice. I have a diagram. So here's a commuter. In this case, they are commuting by electric bike. I don't know if you can see my. So this could be a train station shuttle, it could be electric bike, but it means the result of it is that they've left their car at home during the day, and it could be used by someone else, in this case, a healthcare worker. and in this case, I'm assuming it's an electric car, and they use the commuter uses the car when they need it in the evenings and at weekends, the same as they did before. But instead of parking it at the train station all day, they leave it at home for the healthcare worker to use. And now the two households, the commuters and the healthcare worker, have one car instead of two. Shifting the risk from providers to users is already done. So in Hayfield, some parents send their children to school in Hope. No transport provided
warning.
by. Yep, that's great. No transport's provided by the local authority. It's not a normal distance to travel, but they choose to do that. The parents themselves have set up a shuttle to school for their children. They commission it from a minibus taxi provider, and they make sure it's paid, and they share the cost between them. The school knows and can contact, so they have the data and the communication links with which to prompt all the families who live in Hayfield that this initiative has taken place. And that ensures that everybody knows about it, and it becomes affordable because there are enough people using the school shuttle. So that's one simple example of where this is already done. And we're trying to develop the systems that enable that to happen more easily. So here's the diagram of the financial flows, where you have a number of users, and the platform that we're developing combines the fares of those users using an online booking service. So they book and pay on an online schedule. That money is then transferred to a bank account that is specific for that service. So in the case of the school shuttle, or it could be the train station shuttle, or it could be a car club, or a shared bike initiative. And then that finance is used to pay the different costs of the vehicle. So you've aggregated users' payments online, and then you've used that money to pay for the different costs. There is going to be a shortfall between the two. It's very difficult to make sure that a shortfall or a surplus, but it's difficult to get the rate that you charge to exactly equal quarters of the transport group. Users themselves, but as is described, the organisations that also depend on transport being provided, such as employers who have data and communication links with which to manage that risk. So this is our envisaged transition. Because of COVID, we're focusing more on shared access to electric bikes and electric cars rather than station shuttles for obvious reasons. So I can discuss the details of those later, but I think I shared some websites that did that earlier. Okay, that's all from me.
Super, thank you. So between the two, or three, if we include Andy, we've covered quite a lot of ground there. Some very specific local, and I'm going to ask Tina a specific question about that, in that the map with those walking routes you want us all to start normalizing and using. Is that on your website now, or will it be shortly so that we can access it?
Well, Tina is muted. Perhaps I could answer that and say, no, it's not actually on the website at the moment. But I'm glad you mentioned the website, because Town Team have just launched a new one this week.
Yes,
As soon as we get the approval.
Roland, we need you to stop sharing your screen. Yeah, there's everybody back. I like the faces.
And now I'm unmuted. Get to it.
Okay, so I'm sure you'll put a message out via social media once it is on your website, and then we can share that link, because I'm sure, you know, transition and civic association people and that will be keen to walk those routes and check them out, and hopefully encourage families to use them to get to school. I'm very keen on kids not being driven to school.
Yeah.
And my husband was having memories of walking to school in snow in shorts when he was a lad this morning. But we don't quite need to go to that extreme, but there you are.
Yeah, Jean, if I can just come in, we have got incredibly detailed mapping, which we're just finalising some elements, but it will, as Andy said, go up very soon. We've got the sort of the train line one, but we've got a very detailed map so that people will be able to contribute and comment very helpfully. Thank you.
And I can see one of our transition members, Francis, who's in there, who's doing quite a lot of work increasingly with our schools for transition and civic association and national park all combined. And, you know, letting the schools know those routes exist is, you know, certainly can get incorporated into that message. Andy.
Yes, that's one of the proposed actions in the travel plan, which hopefully will go out to consultation in a month or two's time. But that, yes, getting that plan into schools through various methods is one of the actions.
So we'll do what we can to support that. I've got one other little comment, and then I'll open up for more. And that was just that earlier today, knowing I had this tonight, I just noticed on social media that Minneapolis in the US has just gone out to public consultation to triple the cost of all on-street parking in their core city center area and ring fence that money to subsidize public transport.
Wow.
That's quite impressive. Now it's going out to public consultation, it'll get watered down, it'll get messed about with, but a city, and Minneapolis is not a small place, is actually gotten as far as going out to consultation on that. I think that's pretty impressive. So that's just Jean's observation of something interesting today. So anybody else got any questions and things to ask?
Can I raise one, Jean? Actually, a couple. First one for Roland is just a comment, really, because I last week took a bus from Buxton to Hayfield, and of course, after a certain time, and if you're a certain age, you travel for free, but it actually cost me £4.50. Now, I don't know if that seems a lot or little, but to me, it seemed quite a lot, sufficient to discourage me from doing it very often. Just a thought. Anyway, the other one's for Tina, which, Tina, as you know, my group got a problem with Route 3 with cycles, although we won't go into that for the moment. We'll talk about that in due course. But
it's being addressed, Charles.
Sorry?
It's being addressed.
Excellent. I'm going to say, just on that, last week I had to go to Manchester, and it's my want, I take my bicycle and I cycled down Oxford Road, which has got wonderful cycle tracks, very clear, off the road, and nevertheless a pedestrian still stepped off in front of me. And so pedestrians and cycles together can be tricky.
Yes.
I've spent most of my life cycling in London, so I've kind of got a sixth sense for that, but not everyone has. But I'm just wondering why you necessarily want a 6-month trial when you've done all this research already. Because certainly the routes I'm aware of, it won't work. It just cannot work because people will be walking on muddy areas which have not been prepared. And I have a suspicion that might be applied to one or two of your other routes as well. Can you not just say, we've done the research, we know there's the need, let's go ahead and apply for the grant and go for it?
That's a very good point. Thank you, Charles. Your earlier part of the comment there actually underlines precisely why we want to do an experiment, because you said bikes and pedestrians, I'm paraphrasing, but bikes and pedestrians don't mix awfully well, and somebody stepped out in front of you. What we want to do is to raise the profile of the whole thing and get people discussing it and working out themselves how things can be better. We're talking about behavioural change. I don't think we can probably carry on with the volume of people and ways of moving around that we have currently, we have got to make some changes. I do believe that. And if we just sort of say, oh, well, it's all right, it's here for you on a plate, go off and do it, I suspect the impact and the benefits would not be so great. If we engage with people and say, have a look at this, we're not saying cycle these routes now, but if they were better surfaced, do you think they'd be useful to you? You get people to start considering how they move around and whether or not they would, rather than imposing stuff on them. It's always, I find, and I think that, you know, the rest of our group believe that it's better to talk to people and engage with them and get them to make decisions rather than telling them what to do. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing the 6-month experiment. The other aspect of it, another aspect of it, is the fact that we know that there is considerable government funding coming quite soon towards cycle routes. And we also know that Buxton, partly I think because of the work that we've been doing, is quite high on the list for Derbyshire County Council, who would distribute that money. And if we have got routes that people are happy with and believe could be improved and should be improved, we're much, much more likely to achieve the funding to get a really good network up and running for our town.
Can I just come in on that very briefly, because I haven't been involved directly with the routes myself, but I've been very conscious of the people that have been involved are all the enthusiasts, and that's why I think we need the 6 months, so that the ordinary people that are not keen cyclists, not keen walkers, can have the opportunity to say, well, actually, I'm not going to use that, or, oh, that's interesting. And as Tina says, then, you know, if we got that evidence that it's popular amongst the whole population, then hopefully the funding will then come to make the surfaces suitable. And, you know, I agree entirely with you that the major thing, which is highlighted in this actual decarbonising transport report, of keeping cyclists and pedestrians separate. And that's something, you know, that will take a lot of funding, but is so important.
Can I throw in just one quick suggestion, which is, because I know Tina has also produced quite a few signs which she thinks might go up when this starts. And one which is, cyclists, ring your bell. It sounds obvious, but even people on the Monsell Trail, which is very wide, of course, there are still sometimes problems, because sometimes cyclists actually don't feel they want to ring a bell, because pedestrians think it's kind of imposing, saying, hey, I'm more important than you. But actually, it helps. So the sign's actually telling people to ring their bells if there's a pedestrian ahead, so they expect it. Could just save a few accidents.
Charles, do you know, I really, really value that comment, because we've had loads and loads of discussion about bells. As you know, I think it was a Government Act of 1969 said that all bicycles must be sold with bells. But there is no legislation, and we've actually gone to government and asked them if they're going to consider looking at the legislation again. That means that people have to put the bell on the bike and use it, and they have no such intention. So I welcome the idea that we should put signs up suggesting people should. We did discuss it, but then because of the legislation, we thought, well, if legislation isn't insisting, then we shouldn't really. But yeah, the other thing is that we're asking cyclists always to give way to pedestrians. So it is about cultural change. It won't happen overnight, but this experiment should start the conversation and get people talking about it. We intend a very big publicity campaign to get everybody thinking about how we get around and how we should behave to one another. Thank you for that, Charles. It's enormously helpful.
Can I chip in there?
Yeah, go ahead then. No, you've muted yourself.
I've been walking on trails quite a lot in recent weeks, and cyclists sometimes just pass you by with no warning. Sometimes they ring a bell, and you don't know which side they're coming. I had one person say, behind you on your right. And I found that extremely helpful because I could go to the left. And that could be part of a training and education for cyclists, not only to say I'm here, but to say I'm where I am in relation to you. I found that really very useful.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes,
I see Francis is, Jean Todd, go ahead, then Francis.
Sorry, I just wanted to say you have to remember that some pedestrians might be deaf. So, I mean...
Can't please all the people all the time. It's just...
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point.
But I know the town team's having problems with the ownership of the land as well for the cycle paths, getting permission.
Francis, then Terry.
Are we?
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Jean, I didn't know about that.
Okay, Francis, you'll go.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on what Tina said about behavioural change. I usually lived in London for years, and I lived in Newham, which is very densely populated. And while we were there, a walking bus route was set up for schools. And so basically, parents who weren't able to walk their children to school because they had to go off to work, they could pass their children out to the walking route, and that was very successful. But also, I usually get the train down to London to see my parents, but I had to take my dad to hospital a couple of weeks ago, so I had to drive down. And I've never had such a pleasurable experience as driving through Hackney at the moment. I was absolutely amazed. It's got a 20 mile per hour total transport zone, and because of that, the attitude of drivers, pedestrians and cyclists, I had cyclists sort of whizzing either side of me because they were going faster than me in the car. Pedestrians were quite comfortable about walking out on zebra crossings in a way that in London you're not usually that comfortable doing that. And it was completely different to the last time I drove in Hackney, and I was absolutely amazed. It was, so I wondered whether there was going to be a move to have a sort of slower speed limit across the whole of Buxton to encourage pedestrians to be more confident.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really good point, Francis. Thank you. And also with we are discussing that, and I think it's got to come really, the 20 mile per hour or something. And with regard to walking buses, we've Andy, are you there? Andy will sing to you or hum to you the Buxton Walking Bus song, which we've already written.
I knew this was coming. I knew I couldn't get away with this. Yes, we have penned a song. I'm not sure. Yeah, okay, I'll sing it. We are the walking bus. You're very proud of us. We'll kick up our heels. Tina wrote this bit. I've forgotten the words. Anyway, it goes on. We've taught it to Buxton Junior School so far, but that's been rather interrupted, as so many things, by COVID, I'm afraid.
Love it.
So we have a walking bus song, and it's all about environmental care and everything else, and health and well-being. Yes, and Andy will sing it to you properly in full at some stage.
Hey, Terry, your turn.
Okay, I think there's some wonderful stuff here. Rob Hopkins, the co-founder of Transition Towns, encourages us to use our imagination to envisage a sustainable Buxton, in our case. What you're doing at the moment is trying to mitigate an unsustainable system. I think what he means is that unless we envisage a sustainable one, we have no idea where we're trying to get to. And we will fall short of sustainability, with obvious implications. If you fall short of sustainability, you come to an end pretty swiftly.
Yeah.
So, would it be worth having a vision of Buxton as sustainable in terms of transport and other things, if you wish, And would Rob Hopkins' vision be a good starting point? Because it's quite radical.
Well, yes, I need to know a little bit more about Rob Hopkins' point of view, but I'm making notes. So yes, but I mean, we do need to change things quite dramatically and considerably.
And quickly.
It's got to be measured, and it's got to take everybody with us. I don't believe it works if you start imposing things. People have got to believe in it and want to join in. And we want to do much more work with the schools, as Andy was saying. But at the moment, that's slightly complicated. But we'll get there, won't we, all of us?
Anybody got a question for Roland? There's some stuff coming up in the chat about car share and car clubs and things. Well, we have somebody that's his specialist subject. Has anybody want to pick that brain a little bit?
Yeah, I wanted to ask how I mean, I see put the links in to the places where you can kind of join the, you know, to get yourself an e-bike or get into an e-bike or sharing an e-car sharing. How is it being taken up, and is it being successful so far? I mean, when I was working in Germany, a lot of the people I was working with, nobody came to work in a car at all. Quite a lot of them were members of a kind of car clubs, and I'm really pleased to hear that such a thing's being started actually in the High Peak. Sounds like a really good initiative. And I also wondered, is there any place for these kind of community, well, the bus that you can call to come and pick you up? I know that they've got this service in Staffordshire Moorlands. You can actually come to Buxton on it.
Dialer bus or something, is it?
It's a dialer bus.
Me?
Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hello? Yeah, just checking. So yes, our car scheme, which until now we've been calling micro car clubs. We have 3 operational, one in Edale, one in New Mills and one in Hayfield. The New Mills and Hayfield ones have been going for over. We're definitely looking for other people car schemes. The intention is these use cars that are not owned by any of the participants, but they start off using an existing car, a car that belongs to one of the participants. Usually these car clubs are just 2 or possibly 3 households. And so that overcomes the problem that what will I do if it's not there when I need it? So in forming your car club, you make sure that the needs of the people are compatible, i.e. you need to use the car at different times to the other household. Conventional or commercial car clubs work in cities, but they don't work in areas such as Buxton or more rural areas like Hayfield and New Mills, because the dependence on cars is very high. So people won't use a car club because they've already got a car, and the provision of public transport is poor. So they're too dependent on their car. So this is why it's a really good initiative that it's taking place in Buxton to increase cycling, because this is a way to break that deadlock at a very reasonable cost. Because once you can use the bike and leave your car behind, if you can also enable that car to be used by someone else at that time, then the financial benefit to you as a household is significant. You are you might be reducing, if you've got 3 households, you're reducing the costs of the car by 2/3. You could also do the same with the bike. If you need an electric bike, you can also share the use of that. We have one shared electric bike operating in Grindleford in the Hope Valley, and we're at the moment setting up one in Hayfield. So these are very small units where the people involved take responsibility for operate. They combine their own pay-as-you-go fares and make sure that all costs are covered. And we're providing the link between the online schedule and the dedicated bank account, where payments made on the online schedule can be collected and then used together to pay for the costs of the vehicle or bike. I hope that answers your questions. I was interested, I think, was it Charles who asked a question earlier about that the bus was expensive from Buxton to Hayfield. I just wondered if you had an explanation as to why it might be expensive.
I don't have an explanation apart from that it's expensive to run a bus.
Well,
it should be cheaper to take public transport than to drive yourself.
Obviously, at the moment, not many people are taking buses, so they've got to make a profit. I mean, I can understand why. It's just the degree of subsidy. So, of course, if you're of a certain age, you can travel for free after 9:30. But if you're not, and if you're the sort of person who might just take a bus but might not, I just feel that's probably just a little bit too much. I don't want to...
Oh, right. Well, I think this is a really important point. And I think I did briefly touch on it. How much subsidy are you, as a nation, are you hoping for? If the sustainable alternatives, which people can't use unless they're there, sustainable and affordable, because that's part of sustainability. If they're not yet there, people can't use them. So you have to provide them. So you have to subsidize them. How long will you subsidize them for? And let's assume they cost the same as the cars provision. It's cost, well, you've got 100 billion a year, same as the health service cost. It's a huge amount that cars cost. It's a huge amount that sustainable alternatives that people could use instead cost. How long can you survive that that subsidy? So my suggestion is that it's not a workable just to make a shopping list of transport that you want and then expect it to be viable. And this is why I'm very keen on the name of Transition Buxton, because it's this transition that needs to be negotiated from where we are with cars, which are undermining the services which you would prefer. How do we make those transitions one car at a time to alternatives? And it's by, I'm suggesting that make jail at home where it is used by somebody else as a way to start that transition from where they are at the moment, which is they're a car owner. And once you break that and enable them to cycle, for example, then they can leave their car at home as part of the car sharing scheme, and they can use their bicycle for that journey. And then they've broken the cycle. They're using their car on a pay-as-go basis, and then they can to using public transport more, making it financially viable.
So thank you, Roland. Your brain may get picked outside this meeting about how we could maybe get a little germ of something happening in Buxton, because you're doing good work elsewhere in the High Peak. But it's time for us to round up and finish up. Our hour is nearly up. I always, find this hour a useful and quick hour. So I will just flag up that in a fortnight's time, our next one of these is about what's called the donut economy, and it's not about eating lots of donuts. It's a healthy economy should be designed to thrive, not grow. There's an economic concept that we always have to grow and build and grow and build and grow and build, and that's not true. And in fact, a healthy economy thrives but doesn't have to grow. And a fantastic woman called Kate Rayworth will tell us all about it in a little video, and then we'll talk about that. And our local economics expert, who is an economist, Pete Milway, who helped with me to write the Buxton Economic Resilience Study, will help me chair and coordinate the Q&A bit for that, because he's got the initials after his name that I don't have. We'll carry on. We have 3 more after that before Christmas, and the next one after that is again on an economic theme. It's about participatory budgeting, how local people can get more involved in making the decisions about the money that is our money that is spent on our behalf. And then a couple more, one about energy and one about the Buxton Neighbourhood Plan. Planning is under scrutiny at the moment, and having a neighbourhood plan is all part of that, to again allow us to take as much control as possible at a local level of what does and doesn't happen here. So lots to do. We'll keep you informed by email and social media, and always open to ideas and suggestions. And if anybody's got a seminar they want to offer or suggest, we'll pick up again after Christmas and keep these rolling, because people seem to like them. And as long as we've got speakers and audience, we'll keep doing it. And I think that's it for tonight. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Rowan, for giving us your time from Hayfield. I know it's not very far, but your contribution is gratefully received, and it's nice to be working in partnership with our town team. We're all working together to make Buxton the best place possible for a very long time to come. So, thank you and good night.